Welcome to Sabah. This is the home of the Kinabatangan, Sabah's longest river. It flows from the western ranges across eastern Sabah and then meanders its way right through to the east coast and meets the Sulawesi Sea, all 560 kilometers of river. To get from point A, the origin of the river, to point B, where the river meets the sea, you would have to do the 100-meter dash 5,600 times. That's how extensive it is. Its river basin alone covers 16,800 square kilometers, and that's about 23% of Sabah's land area. When you reach the lower 70 to 100 kilometers of the river, you will come to what is called the Kinabatangan floodplain. Now this is probably the only forested floodplain left in Asia. Okay, sounds really exciting. The last forested floodplain in Asia. You might think, so what? What does that mean? Well, if the Sabah state government decided that the Kinabatangan floodplain was Sabah's gift to the earth, surely it must be important. Now, what's special about floodplains, especially this one, is that you can find all kinds of flora and fauna there. If you like living with remarkable wildlife and fascinating habitats, then this could very well be your home. We're talking about making a home in limestone caves, dryland dipterocarp forests, riparian forests, freshwater swamp forests, oxbow lakes, and salty mangrove swamps. They're all here. And so are 250 bird, 50 mammal, 20 reptile, and 1,056 plant species. The Bornean pygmy elephant and the Sumatran rhinoceros choose to hide out here, and not just anywhere else. It's also one of only 2 places on Earth where 10 primate species can be found together, including the orangutan, the proboscis monkey, and the Bornean gibbon. There must be something good about this place that you and I don't know about. Luckily, some people do, like the people in these villages. There are 104 villages like these in the Kinabatangan. 13 are in the floodplain area. Now, who in the world would live in a place that floods regularly? River people, or orang sungai as they are locally known. They live a simple existence in small scattered settlements along the Kinabatangan. Everything they do relates to the river. Naturally, their primary activities are fishing, small-scale agriculture, hunting, logging, and even bird's nest harvesting. For some of us city people, it's like being on a shoestring camping trip all year long. Not surprisingly, this place has a lot of good stuff. So good that in the year 2005, some 26,000 hectares of the Lower Kinabatangan was gazetted as a wildlife sanctuary under the Wildlife Conservation Enactment of 1997. A sanctuary, meaning a refuge, shelter, haven, place of safety, a home. It's saying this land is of great value. Don't spoil it now and forever. What is most important in the Lower Kinabatangan is in fact not only the diversity of wildlife, but that it may be the only remaining forested, I repeat, forested floodplain in Asia. Elsewhere in Borneo and much of Asia, the forests along large rivers are on a peat or sandy plains. Not good. The forest of the Kinabatangan is an exquisite floodplain and a premier example of a natural ecosystem. Now, floodplains are naturally very fertile. All around the world, they've attracted human settlement. Most of the great ancient civilizations in the history started in floodplains. They were then converted bit by bit into large-scale agriculture development. Floodplains can support rich ecosystems, both in quantity and diversity. Lots of it and all kinds of it. When floodplain soil gets wet, you get an immediate surge of nutrients left over from the last flood and from the decomposition of accumulated organic matter. Stuff like this is what makes floodplains particularly valuable for agriculture. Wait a minute, valuable for agriculture? That can only mean one thing: commercial economic activities. Surprise? Or no surprise. So you get people coming in, bringing their cars, heavy machinery, and all their city habits. And they're wondering, what can I do with this land to turn it into a viable business? Or in short, how can I make money here? Then they engage in agriculture, logging, clearing the land, basically messing it up real quick, taking too much, too fast without thinking whether there'll be more where that came from. Unsustainable development, unmonitored and uncontrolled human activities, not a good sign. What is Asia's last forested floodplain may well be on its way to destruction. If left uncontrolled, this could turn into this in a matter of years. What you are about to see now shows you how one action affects the whole ecosystem. Today, 85% of the floodplain forest has been converted to agriculture. The remaining forest is fragmented, split up here and there. But let me ask you, if 85% of the forest is already cleared for agriculture, where would the original inhabitants go? 250 bird species, 50 mammal species, 20 reptile species, and what about the 1,056 plant species? Do they still exist? Is there enough space for the elephants who migrate over long distance? Where will the solitary rhino hide? Less forest means loss of habitat for wildlife. Less space means less food. Less forest cover means less protection. Less protection means doom. It's a simple equation, but sadly, many are unaware that the destruction of ecosystems will eventually affect human quality of life on this earth too. Humans are perhaps the most enterprising and greedy species. Large areas of land here have been and are still being cleared for oil palm plantations. Of course, the more space to plant, the more products can be produced, and therefore more profit can be generated. But even the low-lying flood-prone areas are also planted with oil palm. Now that's the greedy part. 75 square kilometers of flood-prone and peat lands along the banks of the river that are under oil palm cultivation are actually not economically ideal. Why plant there? In 2008, as much as 28% of the total planted area of oil palm in Sabah was in the Kinabatangan region. So whatever happened to the forest and the wildlife that depended on it? Have we wiped them all out? Again, because of the unsystematic clearing of the land, natural habitats around the Kinabatangan Wildlife Sanctuary became isolated and fragmented. You'd think, well, at least there is still some forest, so that's fine. But it is not as simple as that. Landowners spend large amounts of money to try and tame the land, putting up electric fences, digging ditches and building bunds. Well, after all, they chose to live in a floodplain. They construct high bund walls as high as 13 feet, but they turned out to be no match against nature. In the year 2004, floods wiped out thousands of acres of oil palm in the Kinabatangan, costing damage in millions of ringgit. Despite that, they're still building bund walls. When all walls and ditches have failed and they're left with little to profit from the land, some landowners end up simply abandoning the area. Some of these areas are in thousands of acres. Sadly, these actions are not without consequence. Even Gandhi understood the implications in his time. He said the earth has enough for our need, but not enough for our greed. The whole balance of nature is severely affected when we take away too much, too fast. A whole chain of destruction begins. So now you have a whole lot of abandoned land lying around. Gone is the natural forest cover. What happens next? It's the wildlife that comes under threat. Wildlife has a nature-given right to live on the land. And wildlife do not need land titles or ownership papers. How exactly do they come under threat? In the course of their daily activities, in search of food, shelter and companions, they wander onto agricultural land, which used to be a forest they knew. After all, it was their turf before. But now they're thinking, hey, what's this ditch doing here? I can't cross over. What happened to that tree that used to be here and that branch over there? It's all disappeared. They have less food resources in a fragmented forest and more artificial barriers to deal with. What happens then is there are bottlenecks along the wildlife movement path, especially for elephants. As elephants have no choice but to move through the plantations to forage for food, they are at risk of being injured by traps set up for small animals or getting themselves in a fix because of man's activities. WWF-Malaysia has had to coordinate numerous elephant rescues in the